Hey guys, and welcome to part 2 of Magical Inks. Or I should say ink crafting. It doesn't have to be magical ink, as I mentioned in part 1. And if you haven't seen part 1, scroll back, find it. If this interests you, and this is scratching an itch maybe that you didn't realize you had, or you're just new to how this particular crafting works, I would highly suggest to watch the first video, because what we covered was how to make basically what your base is going to be for, what I'm covering here. All the magical inks I am covering is based on a tincture of dragon's blood resin, which, and if, again, watch the first video, I would highly suggest, if this interests you. A tincture is using a high percentage alcohol. I use 95% alcohol to extract the properties of whatever herb or resin that you're diluting in it. And essentially what you're doing is you're using the alcohol to distill the properties from whatever you put into it. For a tincture can take anywhere between 3 and 8 weeks. I prefer to go longer. Now, this one I started 3.5 weeks ago. So when I did the first video, it was only 2 weeks old. So it really didn't have the pigment that I was hoping for. And I don't think that the pigment is going to be all that much better now, even after this amount of time, because I'm using the Draco version of Dragon's Blood, which does not have the saturation of the, I think it's called a Cinnamous version, which is like blood red, which is why it was used as a magical ink for 3,000 plus years. We figure around 3,000 years. It's probably longer than that. So anyway, you learn how to make this tincture. Again, this is just creeping up on 4 weeks. So I'll use this for example, and I'll do a quick tutorial on how you should probably, you want to filter this out before you start adding it to other pigments. And what I do is, the idea is that I'm using this base tincture added to more stable and better pigments for working if you're going to do stuff on parchment or paper, or in your book of shadows and whatnot. If you're doing just spell work, you can use this tincture as an ink just by itself, but it's going to have more of a saturation like this, and that's probably not even a good example. This is a better example. That's just a straight tincture, and it's not bad. I mean, it's red, and you can read it, and in most of these cases, I mean, I can even smell the dragon's blood resin in this. It is a pungent resin, and it's a fantastic if you're gonna do incense and stuff like that. It's a great resin no matter what. So it's really expensive to get the really good dragon's blood right now. It's almost impossible, especially after the last year with COVID and whatnot, and it's almost impossible. And if you did get some chunks, you would pay an extraordinary amount of money. I mean, more than I would. I mean, the reason I make my own stuff is because I don't want to buy what someone else made. That's the bottom line with that. So let's get into how I'm going to use this base tincture in different types of ink media, whether it's ink or watercolors or look, you can use beet juice. You can grind up your own blueberries. Anything in nature that stains can be made into an ink. Right? At every step of the process, if you put the intent into it, it really doesn't matter what the ingredients are. Again, carrot juice and beet juice made into an ink, if you've put the intent into it, it's going to further your goal in whatever crafting you're doing. That makes sense, right? Okay, let's dive into this. Okay, so we're talking about inks and use in magical practice. I'm not calling them magical inks because they're not magical until you put your intent into them. This is I filtered out some of the Dragon's Blood tincture I made about almost 4 weeks ago, and it has a good pigment to it, but I did add some red indie ink to this. So this is basically 90% alcohol with some added Winsor & Newton ink. And Winsor & Newton is the purest pigment that you will find. I say that as an artist. Now, this is pretty thin. If you look at it, it looks like blood. And I'm pretty happy with it. But this will not flow very well in a dip pen situation. And when I say dip pen, for you guys who are new to this, that would be pens that have a little reservoir in them. This is a very fine one, so the thinner the pigment, the better, but it needs to have a certain amount of consistency, and that is where gum arabic comes into play. This can be had basically anywhere they sell baking supplies. Amazon, gum arabic. Get it in powder form. Do yourself a favor. Don't get it in raw form. And you add that to water. Distilled water is best, but, you know, filtered water, if you're not using distilled water, then at least use filtered water. And I got this to a consistency, if you see the bubble there, it's not like water. It's a little thicker. And maybe this could be a little bit more thick in how I made this, only because you'll be adding a little bit of this to whatever you want to be your ink. So, with that said, let's start at the first thing you can do. Watercolor paints. It's perfect. You can take, I'm using these big old cool fancy water brush things I got. Basically, you fill them up with water, and then you can put it in there. And let's do something other than red. Let's we can mix it up here a little. Try to go with the purpley something. Yeah, that works. Okay, so now once you get a watercolor to a consistency of a color that you want, you know, you're just mixing water and different pigments together, but try to get the pigments in there real good and get a real good nice saturation of it. Now you have to kind of do this with a lot of water, and now if you're gonna do this and you want to fill up an entire bottle, that's fine. I find that if I do individual inks, they're a little more potent. And I can't say that with... Oh, look at that. Get a nice purple hue out of this. Now, this is only a few drops of ink. So, but you know, I'm trying to do this in a way where I can show you how easy this is. So I've got a really nice purple hue here. So now, clean our brush off a little bit, get that out of the way. Now, we've got a watercolor. Here is the magical ink part. I'm going to take this lovely dragon's blood tincture, and I mentioned it in the last video, but these little pipettes that you can get on Amazon, you can get like 200 of these for like $11. I got 150. I still don't know how long it's going to take me to get through 150, but you can actually get a good reading on how much of that you're going to add. And I add about half and half of the dragon's blood tincture to the watercolor. And we can swirl that around a little bit. Now, you'll see, because I did have some gum arabic in this version that I made, so it instantly got a little thick, and you can see the bits. So that's the dragon's blood resin being annoying. So there's a lot of things you can do here at this point. You can use this right now perfectly. There's nothing wrong with it. Let's even try it. I'll do it with the brush first, just so you guys can see what the consistency of this is. Yeah, it looks like mud. But it doesn't negate anything about the properties of this. You can still use this for whatever magical purpose you want. Now, if you're going to put this in your book of shadows and you want it to be something a little, you know, with oomph to it. So basically you've got a watercolor that has dragon's blood in it and a little bit of gum arabic. Well, what you can do is you can take a little bit of extra gum arabic, And the stuff is sticky, so when you put the tops on, you'll hear that. I'm just going to pour a little bit right into it. I know. I probably should have used the pip, but now a really cool thing has happened since adding this is that it's become a little bit more watery, but more consistent without those, what I like to refer to as like coffee grinds. Now it doesn't have that now. It's pretty smooth, like wine. And if this was a deep red, it would look like blood right now. So now I will use the pipette, and I will add some more gum arabic to that. And I will put even more than I think I need. Because the thing about gum arabic is that it's going to make, yeah. See, now it's got that like almost like when you make Jello before it hardens. It's got a little, you know, slower drip to it. That's the best way for me to say. And this is purple, but I'm just gonna go over what I just did before, and you'll see how it's come out a little stronger. So you have to experiment between how much pigment and how much gum arabic and how much dragon's blood you add to it. Now, here's where we say, okay, this is, let's just say this is the base ink. It has the ingredients we want. It has the dragon's blood. It has the Arabic, which is magical in many properties, if you look it up. So let's say I want to make this ink specifically protection. Well, here's some rosemary tincture. And I'll shake it up. And normally I wouldn't shake it up to use in an ink. Because these tinctures I've been doing for about 4 weeks right now, and I want them to go for at least 9 or 10 weeks before I use them. But in this case, I want to make sure that you guys see what pigment you can actually get from just a simple tincture. And this is an herbal tincture, and it is deep. It smells amazing, but it's a deep green when it's distilled properly. Oh, there you go. You know it? See that green? That is just alcohol and rosemary sitting in this bottle for the last 4 weeks. And that's magic right there. That's magical properties. So I'm going to add that to the ink. Now, here's what you have to remember. So, okay, so we've got dragon's blood in here, and now we have rosemary. So the magical intent for this would be to be a fiery protection. Let's say that's our intent. So we will put that intent in there. And this is quick, but I'm pretty intent on it. Okay. So now you can see this is really just like a wash. Really not different, not any different than when I was doing just the dragon's blood. But here's the thing. Now gum arabic. I put about more than a quarter of that. This is 4 grams worth. And it's still very thin. It's still very thin, but it has a good pigment to it, you know? And making individual inks has a lot of power in itself. So what I will do with this is I will take this and I will put this in a bottle and let it sit for days, probably. And then I'll test its consistency, and I'll probably add more gum arabic, because the gum arabic, all it's going to do is make it a better consistency for writing. But it's the time that you let this sit and you shake it every day, several times a day. I do my tinctures and inks. I shake them all because I'm making them with my intent. So that's a great example of just using a simple watercolor base for an ink. And every time you can use a watercolor, you can use any other thing that makes a stain. And I said it before, but blueberries, beets, anything in nature that stains can make a magical ink. So I hope you guys liked the presentation. I'm going to cover how to do these tinctures in detail. I'm thinking the next video is going to be that. And I think I can cover it all in one, because if you've done one tincture, you've done them all. So, all right. So that is the hands-on part for tonight. Okay, so I think we dove into the how-tos of you want to get your basic ingredients, and whatever is best for you is going to work. It's again, it's the intent. So whether it's watercolors or it's using some pre-existing ink that you're adding other ingredients to, pardon me, once you get your intent into those ingredients and then you're writing them down, that is a whole other skill set of focusing your intent. I mean, I was very, very happy with how my first batch came out, even though I think a couple more weeks would have made it better. But it's perfectly fine to use for me personally. And it's pungent, and it has my intent in it. And I'm looking forward to using it. I mean, I'll be tweaking this a lot. You know, I'm probably going to add a lot more Arabic to this, because I think it can be a little bit thicker. And generally, it's such a fine line. It's between thin and too thick. But once you find that sweet spot, you will find a lot of pleasure in using your inks. No matter what ink you use or ingredients, you're putting your intent into it, and that's the magical part. You don't have to call any deities, or you don't have to, you know, have your little cauldron, even though I do, and I'm loving it. Just make it your own, and it will serve you. And I am a real believer in that. So I will leave you with a little smudging. And our next round of videos will be covering candles, tinctures, specific tinctures. Even though you learned how to make a tincture in the last 2 episodes here, we're going to go into more specific tinctures, and I'm talking about tinctures that are basically heavier on the resin end: frankincense, myrrh, benzoin. Benzoin is probably the most important tincture of them all, because they can be used in every single part of your crafting, whether it's oils, incense, candles, and medicinal, as long as you're using, medical grade benzoin. It can be ingested in certain ways, but it is the most important tincture. It is the most important tincture that I make. If I had to only make one tincture, it would be benzoin, because it could be used in anything. Okay, so that's this, and I will see you in the next round of videos, and I'm pretty sure I've been working on the candle one for quite a while, so which will be a 2-parter. I'm thinking I'm going to do the tincture one first, because I think I can cover that all in one episode, and that way we're not having too much of a lull. I don't want to be, a Walking Dead series here where you don't hear from me for 8 months. So, with that said, blessed be, and dudes, pick some stuff and make other stuff out of it. Energy just turns into other energy. Utilize it. All right, I'll talk to you later.